Hi everyone, I am here with the lovely and phenomenal Miss Sowmya Krishnamurthy. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much. We're so excited to speak with you. You're amazing. So, we're going to hop into the questions. What sparked your interest in music journalism?
It's funny. A lot of people have these like dreams of writing the great American novel or being like Hunter S. Thompson. And I didn't have any of those. I always knew I wanted to work in the hip hop industry, but I thought my dream was to work at like a Def Jam or a Bad Boy, get one of those jackets that was like iconic back in the 90s. So it was through like a very kind of circuitous path that I came into music journalism, where I actually started my career at the William Morris agency. It's now known as William Morris Endeavor, one of the big talent agencies in Hollywood. And I started in their mailroom training program, which is literally as glamorous as it sounds. You're in the mailroom, pushing a mail cart, delivering mail to agents, running errands, getting coffee, getting yelled at for getting the wrong coffee, things like that. And I did that for a few years, was assisting agents. And then I pivoted into social media and digital marketing, where I got to work with a lot of different artists, everybody from Lil Wayne, Jim Jones, The Game. Like we worked with all the different labels
Mhm.
and, did that for a couple of years. And it was super fun because, again, this was getting closer to what I wanted to do within hip hop. And, through a weird course of events, I was initially doing a lot of digital publicity. So a lot of my friends were journalists. And then as a company, when we pivoted away from entertainment, I just needed something to kind of fill that gap. And again, all my friends are writers.
Mhm.
The writers get the tickets to the free shows and things like that. So I just kind of started freelancing. And it was something that I did. My 9 to 5 was marketing. My 5:01 to 5 a.m. the next day was on the journalism side, and that's really kind of how I started my professional career. Was kind of falling into it, and then realizing that it's fun, it's something I'm good at, and yeah. So I think my story is definitely one where this was not on my vision board, this was not my dream, and in fact, it was something very different. But through kind of a circuitous path, like this is where I ended up.
Nice. So that dives into our next question. You graduated from the University of Michigan. So, how exactly did you get your foot into the music industry?
So go blue, first of all. So I went to the University of Michigan and I actually went to the Ross School of Business, which is an amazing business program. And they have like the top candidates in finance and marketing and everything but hip hop. So I was a little bit kind of in a conundrum where my school wasn't known for really having relationships to the entertainment industry.
Mhm.
And then what I ended up doing is I was writing for my school newspaper, the Michigan Daily. And funny enough, I mean, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I had done a piece about Puffy and the vote or die campaign.
Mhm.
And, I'm thinking no one's reading this. Like, it was a column, it had my name on it, my picture, and all of that. But who's reading this outside of the campus? So I come back to my dorm room at South Quad, shout out to South Quad, and I get somebody left a message on my machine. And again, I'm dating myself back in the day when people had answering machines and would leave messages. And it was somebody from Bad Boy who had read this article. Now,
Wow.
of course, I'm thinking this is a joke, like in my mind, I'd always wanted to work at Bad Boy. I was like obsessed with Puff and just everything
Mhm.
they had done in the 90s. Why would they read the Michigan Daily? They found my number. Like, this is a joke. So I called them back thinking, yeah, ha ha ha. And lo and behold, it was an alumni from the University of Michigan. He happened to work, I believe, in like promotions and marketing at the time. And our school paper came up pretty high on Google search because it's a big school. So
Mhm.
we were chopping it up, blah, 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 woo woo. And funny enough, I was coming to New York, I think in a few weeks or a few months. So
Mhm.
I told him, like, hey, I'd love to meet you and I'm gonna buy you coffee. So he was a little taken aback, but he's like, yeah, whatever. What's this kid gonna do? So fast forward, I come to New York, we meet, and by the time we ended that coffee, I had an internship offer.
Wow.
So, on paper, that sounds amazing. But back then, as still in many cases, those internships are unpaid. So coming
Mhm,
from a small town in Michigan, trying to convince your parents, I want to move to New York and it's going to be amazing. I'm going to work with Puffy. And by the way, you're paying for it. That's not a really great convincing story, especially for somebody, who is first generation, who comes from
mhm,
immigrant parents. So what I ended up doing is through my business school, I got an internship at American Express. So
mhm,
during the day from 9 to 5, I literally worked at Amex in their small business division down in World Financial. And at 5:01, I would jump the train, take it to the bad boy offices. Back then, they were was a 1440 Broadway or something like that. I should know that. I should like have a tattoo or something. And yeah, and that's what I would do. And because I was in the promotions department, all of them worked super late. So it actually ended up working out. So that was kind of how I really got my foot in the door. So it's funny because my school didn't kind of offer a traditional music business program. At least at that time, they didn't, um,
mhm,
or really those resources. But I think one thing my school does have that's amazing is we have a great alumni network. So although there's only a handful of us in the game,
mhm,
we see each other. We definitely try to help each other out. And, even fast forwarding right now, I'm working on my first book. And one of the first people I interviewed is a legend in the game, Bill Adler. He worked at Rush Communications and Def
mhm,
Jam like back in the day, and I saw on his LinkedIn that he spent a few years at the University of Michigan. So
mhm.
when I hit him, that was the first thing in my intro. And, that's what we kind of really bonded over. So, my advice for people is sometimes it can be frustrating, right? If you don't go to a school known for having connections to the industry you want to be in. But I think, with the internet, social media, just kind of a little bit of hustle, you can figure it out.
So true. And just to add on to that, I'm from Maryland, which is not a music city. So, like, what I would do was get on the Greyhound at 3 a.m. to get to New York, finish my internship, get off at 6, hop on the Greyhound again. So, there's no excuses. If you really want it, you have to go for it. Um, s-
And I think now, especially, we're in kind of this post pandemic era where you might not need to be in the big cities. I mean, I think a lot of young people, I tell them now, take advantage of virtual internships, be a virtual assistant. People
Mhm.
need help in different ways. You can do that from your house, so maybe kind of figure it out, see if you like it before you make that big move. But I do think at some point you do want to be in, where the epicenter of your industry is.
Definitely. So you did mention writing for your school's newspaper, the Michigan Daily. So what role did college journalism play in your career?
Yeah, again, it's funny. I guess like in my dream, second life, I would probably be like an English major with like a minor in psychology. Um,
Mhm,
but for whatever reason, I was a very good student. Like in high school, I was valedictorian and I went to like a math and science center, all like the stereotypical, like, nerdy things. So for me, business attracted me because I felt like it was a degree that I could do anything with.
mhm,
At that time you had to apply to get in once you got into the University of Michigan. So there was that
mhm,
extra level of competitiveness, which I actually liked as well.
mhm,
So, journalism in kind of that traditional way, I think I took like a handful of English classes, maybe one comm class. I would have loved to take more, but my, B school degree was so rigorous that I was just in econ and accounting classes all day. So I didn't really have time. But the Michigan Daily was cool. I mean, I started initially writing for kind of their opinion section. And I want to say by my second year, they gave me my own column, which I don't know if that's uncommon, but I like to think that it is, which was dope. So like every, I think other Friday or every like couple Fridays, I
mhm,
basically got to write whatever I wanted. Just kind of write whatever you want. One day it could be about like impending teacher strike, and the next week it could be about Puffy or Vote or Die. It's basically whatever you wanted. Which now looking back, maybe that was kind of my pre-social media platform, right? Where it's just like go off, say whatever you want. Here's 1,000 words to do it.
Lovely. You are literally destined for this. So you've written for major publications like Rolling Stone and Billboard. How were you able to land all these phenomenal opportunities?
Yeah. So, when I was working in my 9 to 5 job in marketing, I just started pitching. And again, I had some relationships. So, at the time I knew, and he's still like, a friend of mine, the editor in chief of Vibe magazine. So I'd
Mm,
get like little, online pieces, nothing crazy, nothing in the book. And then a friend of mine who we had met at Michigan at South Quad, incidentally, he was over at New York Mag's Vulture section.
mm,
And again, it was so new that if they had um, an interview, oftentimes those opportunities would be there. But I will say in the beginning, I aggressively pitched. Like I can say very confidently, I think I pitched the Village Voice probably for 6 straight months and just got either no response or rejection, 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 rejection.
mm,
And I'll be honest, you'll read, because you would pitch something like an interview or a show review, because back then show reviews were a good way to kind of get your foot in the door. And I'm reading other people's stuff thinking, I could do this. Like, what is going on? What's the disconnect? But I do think oftentimes it's just relationships. Like, once an
mm,
editor has a writer they like, they can trust, they're dependable, they just go with that person,
mm,
for better or for worse. And for me, it was just consistency. And one thing that really helped, which is kind of just a little gem for all the other writers out there, pitch something that everyone and their mom isn't already pitching, right? Or
mm,
already in-house somebody's covering. And I want to say my first piece for The Voice, funny enough, was like going to a Ja Rule listening. And this wasn't Ja Rule like Ashanti J-Lo. Like this was years later.
mm,
I think it was called like Pain is Love too, if I remember, and was in a little studio. Not even that many people showed up, but was great because not many people showed up. So
mm,
the fact I'm pitching this somewhat obscure random thing,
mm,
the editor said yes, and that was kind of my foot in the door. Similarly, I think with a lot of places, it's you get one opportunity and then you bring the editor opportunities. So I brought, like for Billboard, we got Chief Keef in rehab because I had a relationship with GBE because I'd interviewed a lot of the Chicago guys, like
mm,
Fredo and Dirk and all those people. So their team came to me and I brought that to Billboard, which
mm,
no other publication got. So sometimes it's kind of leveraging those situations as well,
mm,
especially in the beginning, because you really are just establishing yourself and your portfolio. So it's sort of like, you got to put yourself in the editor's shoes. Who
mm,
are you and like, why should I care? Right.
mm.
So try to be an asset to them or bring something to them that otherwise they wouldn't have.
Lovely. So, which interview from your writing career are you most proud of?
That's a tough one. I really will say that Keith interview was tough. Like he was obviously like huge and, you
Mm,
know, very kind of seminal when it comes to sort of the history of hip hop, but he had done a couple of interviews that hadn't gone too well. And
mm,
you can argue, was it, on him? Was it on the publication? Some combination thereof. So he's already wary of the media. So that was
mm,
tough. And he was in like a rehab facility. So
mm,
he kind of just wasn't happy and he wanted to go home, which is
mm,
understandable. So probably that first hour, hour and a half, we didn't even talk to each other. Like he was sort of sizing me up, I was sizing him up. And I just kind of was a fly in the wall and just politely sat there and let him do his thing.
mm,
Um, until he felt comfortable. And again, I was very lucky because in that situation, I had the time, right? A lot of times with interviews, especially when you're first starting out,
mm,
you'll get what's called a press day, where an artist is doing 10 back to back interviews, you get 15 minutes.
mm,
Think about this as dating, right? That would be like a speed date and not a very good speed date because the first 5 to 10 minutes is just trying to vibe and see if you guys get along. So
mm,
with Keith, luckily, I had several hours with him. And again, there were no distractions. It was like me, him, his manager at the time. I don't even know, maybe one or two friends, but they were somewhere in the house.
mm,
So we were able to kind of have that intimacy.
mm,
But that was a tough one. And it's funny because at this stage in my career, I've interviewed pretty much anybody I'm like a fan of. And I'll say the best interviews are when I'm not a fan of the person
mm,
because you have to go in just more critically, right? And you don't want the piece to just be, I hate your music or I hate you, because that's doing a disservice to the subject and to the reader. So I would actually highly recommend, go outside of your comfort zone. Like I
mm.
know everyone has their list of like, I'm a fan of this person, I want to interview them.
Yeah.
And there's something about those interviews, but I also think, especially when you're talking about like journalism and unearthing something different and unique about this experience, doing interviews outside of your genre or even artists that you're just not really into, or maybe you're not super familiar with, that kind of makes you flex your muscle a little bit more.
Lovely. So, in Fashion Killer, it explores the intersections between hip hop and fashion. So, what sparked your interest in those areas?
So it's funny because I had done a piece for Double XL about this maybe like a year and change ago. And,
Mm,
it was dope because there hadn't been anything else about that. This kind of predates Netflix's The Remix, which is great. You should check it out if you haven't. And I got to interview people like Misa Hilton and ASAP Ferg and a bunch of stylists for like Young Thug and all these, great people.
mm,
And when I was talking to my book agent, we were just, kicking ideas around.
mm,
That was an idea we both kind of honed in on. But I'll be honest, I had a bunch of other ideas that he was like, they're cool, but they're kind of mid. So that's another thing about, journalism specifically. You deal with a lot of rejection. Like you might think this idea is amazing and awesome. And, you talk to somebody in the industry like, it's been done or it shouldn't be done. Or,
mm,
so you got to have, definitely a tough skin and make sure you kind of separate yourself right emotionally from those moments. But yeah, so that's kind of how it started. I'm in the beginning parts of the research phase, but it's been going great. I mean, it's literally been only a couple months, gotten everybody from like, April Walker, Carl Kanai, Big Daddy Kane, Tommy Hilfiger, like right before I jumped on, TV Johnny, who's known for all the grills, and like Houston with Paul Wall just hit me. So people are into talking. And what's cool is what I really want to do is not just highlight the well-known names, right? Like
mm,
there's some names everybody knows. They're kind of in the sort of ethos, so to speak. But I also want to highlight, women and especially women of color who their contributions might not be known, right? We know the artists like the iconic Little Kims and Salt and Peppas, and they're extremely important. But also, I talked to like the first fashion editor at The Source, who's a
mm.
woman, and her right hand person was a woman. I had no idea, so those are people I also want to make sure their stories are captured. I think that's really important. Because oftentimes, hip hop can still be men talking to men, right? And women and, people of different cultures, people from the LGBTQ community are not as represented as they should be. So
Mm,
I really do hope this book kind of delves beyond just like pretty clothes. Like we talk about important things like gender and race and appropriation and, that line between a culture vulture and somebody
mm,
who's actually, an appreciator of the culture.
mm,
Kind of like some of those heavier themes, which I think the fashion industry specifically is very much grappling with now. So it's very
mm,
topical. But yeah, so I'm in the research phase. Fingers crossed, presuming that we don't have any delays. 2023 Fashion Week is when we're looking at, just because traditional publishing is a very long lead time.
mm,
But it's been great. And, for me as a writer, I also kind of came to a point in my career. I've done the cover stories. Again, I've interviewed pretty much every rapper that I want to, and the ones I haven't, I've at least met them or interacted with them on some level. So I needed a challenge. And like a lot of us during COVID, I was like, watching a lot of Netflix,
mm,
eating a lot of food, and just kind of being uninspired because a lot of, interviews and festivals, all those things were put on hold.
mm,
So I really wanted to give myself like a positive project to focus on.
mm.
And also just a challenge. Like, again, I can write a 2,000 word piece, like, I don't know, in an hour, maybe 30 minutes. I don't even know. But, now we're talking 80,000 words, which is a lot of words. I think I've got maybe about 50 interviews so far, and I feel I've just scratched the surface. So it's a marathon, but I am enjoying the process. And yeah, I can't wait till it's actually in bookstores and people can hold it and hug it and read it. So yeah, it's great.
Love it. I can't wait to put it like next to the Michelle Obama book. All of audio.
Oh, nice. Yes. Just give me a few of those sales. Just got to run that for good luck. Yeah.
So, outside of writing, you also launched Double XL Shot Callers podcast. What was it like spearheading that project?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, we launched it prior to this like crazy podcast boom where, I think at this point, everyone, their mom, their dog walker's mom, all has a podcast. But it was something that was very, um, very kind of DIY and bare bones. It was myself, an editor at Double XL, and a producer, and we just kind of all came together. And I just went through my Rolodex and reached out to a lot of industry people, again, behind the scenes people who,
Mm,
are pivotal in making things happen, but people just may not know about.
mm,
So, at the time, I had interviewed Tuma, I believe, who's at Spotify,
mm,
Angela Yee from The Breakfast Club, Lenny S from Rock Nation, Steve
mm,
O, who's a manager A&R.
mm,
So it was fun. It was like basically getting to talk to my friends, right?
mm.
And it was a nice kind of dip into that pond of what it means to, you're booking talent, you're scheduling things, you're figuring out edits, things like that. So yeah, it was like a cool experience.
Lovely. So, what really stood out to me was your importance of representation and just like women unity. So, in hip hop, there seems to be a lack of female voices. So, in your opinion, what do you think needs to be done to get more women involved in hip hop?
Yeah, I mean, the great part is compared to even when I started, there are, more women kind of in the game.
Mm,
Oftentimes women sort of take very specific roles, right? So when you think of women, obviously there's artists,
mhm,
and you think of stylists or publicists, like there's certain functions and niches that women tend to gravitate towards or are stereotypically women are supposedly drawn to.
mm,
But I think when it comes to hip hop, like so many other industries that are male dominated, I think it really has to start from the top, right? And I oftentimes tweet about or think about or talk about, looking at the C suite when it comes
mm,
to like the industry. If you look at the C suite of any major label, I mean, I don't even tell you what it is, but you already know without me telling, right? And I think you're slowly starting to see some change. You see somebody like, Ethiopia over at Motown, Latrice over at Island slash Fourth and Broadway, obviously Julie Greenwald, who's at Def Jam now at Atlantic. So
mm,
you're starting, Sylvia Rohn, obviously at Epic. You're seeing some movement, but I think we just need to see more in numbers and women not only to be in the room, but to be empowered to speak and make change happen. Because oftentimes when we talk about diversity and representation, what companies do is they'll hire like one person from
mm,
said community. And that person is no power, right? They're merely a figurehead. So I think that part is important. And I always kind of urge men in the industry, like
mm,
having a diverse team, whether it be gender, race, again, country of origin, sexual
mm,
orientation, that only helps you.
mm,
And some of the artists who are actually like the dopest and doing the most interesting things, they surround themselves with women. Like I remember I was watching, I think, Pharrell on Drink Champs, and he said, he's like, a lot of my team are women. And I know he works closely with people like Mimi Valdez and, things like that. And he's smart, right? Because you're just getting different thought versus a bunch of dudes in the room where, outside of the ego sausage fest situation, um, you know, you're just group think becomes very common, and it's
mm,
very much kind of like, you're doing things by bros for bros. And I think the artists and the companies that have these diverse teams, they're the innovators and they're kind of making things happen. I mean, Jay-Z at Rock Nation, like a woman runs Rock Nation.
mm,
And even behind the scenes, there's other women that maybe the average person may not know about, like Shaka or Jana, like people like that who are in positions of power and have been with Jay for a long time. And I
mm,
think there's a reason why he does dope shit, right? Like, not to mention his wife is also, Beyonce. Um, so I think that's important. And I think for women, I would say, look, don't be discouraged. Like it's very easy to think you come into this industry and it's a boys club, or, you're going to face a lot of adversity. And I'm not going to lie to you that you won't. Like I don't, every person's experience is different.
mm,
But, I can say for myself that I was able to navigate it successfully without um, sort of, sacrificing my morals and values and, who I was, right? I didn't have to change
mm,
myself. Like I look how I look, I dress how I dress, I am, who I am. And more than anything, when you know your shit and you're good at it, people can't deny that.
mm,
They can try, but it's like they really can't at the end of the day. So I would urge women, like, don't, especially now, like when people are talking about these topics of representation and such, come into the industry. We need more of you. And I'm also not one of those haters, like, because I'm in it, like, that crabs in a barrel, get out of it. No, I want more people. And I want women who are smarter than me, doper than me, like inspire me, show me what I can do in this game, and know that there's enough room for everybody. Like, so many times in industries, especially that are dominated by men, women are
Mm,
taught there's only room for one of you. There's only
mm,
one female rapper that can be hot. There can only be one, you know, girl at the label who's like that girl. No, this is a $1 billion industry. There
mm,
is enough for everybody. And I promise you, men don't do that to each other, right? Like, at least not on the same level. So,
mm.
instead of feeling intimidated or some kind of way, put your arm around that woman, figuratively speaking, help her, like teach her the game. And look, she might take your advice, she might not, she may have a different experience. But, I oftentimes, when people hit me up for like career advice, and it could be
Mm.
something as simple like, hey, I got this job at this company. How much money should I ask? I'll tell them. And look, if you get more, great. If you get less, that's fine too. But from my experience, this is how I would navigate it. Um, and yeah, I'm like open with that. I don't feel like, these are secret keys you got to keep to yourself, because the only way we're going to have, the best industry possible is if we continue to pay it forward. And for those of us who are in the game and who've made it, I think it's on us to help inspire and empower that next generation, because who knows, maybe one day they'll be cutting me a check.
Lift as you climb, major key. So what advice would you have for someone looking to follow in your footsteps?
I think the best advice would be yourself.
Mm,
I think, especially when you come into an industry that you see it with artists all the time, right? Where they feel they got to look a certain way or act a certain way or put on a certain front on social media. And it's like, just be yourself. There's only one you, and stay authentic to that. Like, I think that's important, because people can see that bullshit if you're just trying to, be a part of the peer pressure, or you don't really have a unique thought or perspective.
mm,
And also, I think for women, I would always say, don't take it personally. Like, in any facet of business, like, you will get rejected at this
mm.
stage in the game. I mean, I'm looking at my emails. There's some rappers who don't want to do my book. And on
Wow.
paper, I'm like, my dude, you ain't doing nothing. It's pandemic. Come on. But you can't sort of live your life from a place of, taking things personally. I mean, definitely there's critique, of course, if it's valid, take it into account, but don't hold on to that. I think oftentimes as women, we're constantly ruminating, or I should have done this different, or I should have said this different, or who did I offend?
Mm,
Don't do that, right? They kind of take their L's and keep it moving. And I think that that mentality is something we can all aspire towards, right? It's just, some people, you're not going to be their cup of tea, and that's okay. But most people I found in this game, like, they're cool. Like, I've had no, real issues. And, the people, if there's ever been a situation, usually I can always pinpoint it to that's their insecurity or their ego coming out. That's nothing to do with me. Like, I'm gonna do me, right? So I would say that as well. It's just embrace who you are. And it's also a journey, right? When I was young, I thought by the time I was 30, I would be like married with kids. For some reason, I wanted a minivan. They were cool back then, pre SUV era. And my career would be set. I'd be a millionaire. Like, you have these very grandiose ideas.
mm,
And I think as a culture, we do put a lot of value on that,
mm,
right? This idea of, you are on the Forbes youngest self-made billionaire list, and we're just obsessed with that. And if you look at it, most CEOs didn't make it until in their 40s. And
mm,
most people in the industry, like, yes, I often joke I have the taste of like a 17-year-old boy, because, I curate, rap, and I have to interview a lot of artists who are like teenagers. But the people behind the scenes are grown, right? Most of
mm,
us have 10 plus years in the game, sometimes 15, 20. But
mm,
don't view that as a negative, right? This is a journey. If this is what you want to do, don't be discouraged that that first job didn't work out. Or by the time you're 25, why am I not as rich as, Kylie Jenner? It's like, no, like, run your race, focus on you.
mm,
And I think it kind of pays off. Like, one thing you'll see in the game, a lot of people you started with, they don't stick around
mm.
because for one reason or another. But the ones who kind of wanted this, you look around and we all kind of rise up together. So think of it as a marathon, right? Like, and at the end, I enjoy the ride. Like, it's fun. I get to interview rappers and go to the studio. And yes, there's a lot of work, of course, but it's also like a fun job. There's a lot more jobs that could be way harder than, for me waking up at noon and having to interview an artist. Not
Mm,
too bad, you know what I mean? So just know that it's like a blessing, and enjoy the ride as well.
lovely. And we're going to go into the final question. When it's all said and done, what do you hope to be remembered for?
That is a great question. I think professionally, I would like to have said that I open doors for
Mm,
people who look like me, and not just kind of in that literal sense, but people who felt like they didn't belong, to certain categories, and on paper they shouldn't have made it, right? Like
mm,
I was born in India, and I grew up in a small town in Michigan. I have
mm,
no industry connections, no family connections to the music industry. And the fact that I get to do what I love and be paid for it and respected for it is pretty amazing. And I would hope that that just kind of inspires other people, where you'll find your place in this world. Sometimes when you're young and you're just not sure where you fit in, and you try hard to fit into certain places that just don't feel like a good fit, like one day, like it'll all kind of figure out.
mm.
And I really hope that for myself, as a woman in hip hop specifically, that I kind of show that you can, be successful on your own terms, and you can have a seat at that table with the guys and have a platform and be respected for it and enact change. Like I would love to see the industry again, whether it come to diversity or fairness and compensation,
Mm,
transparency and compensation, like things like that. I would love to see as time goes on.
mm.
I'm one of those people, like I definitely came up during the put your head down, do the work, get paid $400 a week, keep your mouth shut, be happy with it. And that is true. I made $400 a week in my first job before taxes. So do the math there. A lot of ramen, a lot of ramen, and not the trendy ramen, but like the ramen that you get at the store.
Okay.
So, but I want that next generation to not have to go through a lot of those same situations that we did, and just to have a contribution in this industry. Like I'm pretty sure I'm the first, or maybe at this point most senior Indian woman in hip hop journalism. um I don't think there's anybody else. But I would love, to see more people, and not, from all different backgrounds, and to feel like they have a place and that they can really pursue their dreams. Like that would be amazing.
Wow, you're so inspiring. Thank you so much, everyone. This is Miss Sowmya. Your journey is beyond inspiring. So thank you again. And it was a pleasure having you as our guest.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.